Malcolm X's journey to Islam wasn't just about faith, it was about transformation. Before he embraced Islam, his life was filled with hardship, crime, and a deep sense of anger toward the world that had oppressed him. He grew up in a society that constantly reminded him he was less than, that his people were meant to struggle, and that survival often meant bending or breaking the rules. His father was killed under suspicious circumstances, his mother was institutionalized, and he was forced to navigate a world that showed him little mercy. He became Malcolm Little, the hustler, the street-smart young man who learned how to survive in a system designed to keep him down. But prison changed everything. Locked behind bars, Malcolm was introduced to the teachings of the Nation of Islam. At first, he resisted, but the words of Elijah Muhammad spoke to something deeper inside him. He read, he studied, and for the first time in his life, he began to see himself not as the criminal society had labeled him, but as a man with purpose. Islam gave him discipline, a moral code, and a sense of self-worth that no one had ever instilled in him before. He stopped seeing himself as just a product of his environment and started believing in something greater. He adopted the name Malcolm X, rejecting the last name given to his ancestors by slave owners and embracing a new identity rooted in his African heritage and faith. But Malcolm's journey didn't stop there. As he grew in the Nation of Islam, he became its most powerful voice, speaking out against racism, oppression, and the systematic destruction of Black communities. Yet even then, he continued to search for truth. That search led him to Mecca, where he experienced something that changed his perspective forever. He saw people of all colors, Black, white, brown, praying together, treating each other as brothers. It was a revelation. Islam wasn't just a religion for one group, it was a message of unity for all people. This realization led him to leave the Nation of Islam and embrace Sunni Islam, a faith that emphasized peace, brotherhood, and justice. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was more than a personal decision. It was a revolution within himself. It gave him the strength to stand, the wisdom to lead, and the faith to keep fighting, even when he knew it could cost him his life. And that is the power of true transformation. Malcolm X was a man in constant evolution, a man who never stopped searching for truth. When he first embraced Islam through the teachings of the Nation of Islam, it gave him a sense of purpose, a reason to believe that his suffering and the suffering of his people were not in vain. Islam provided structure, discipline, and a new way of thinking. He was no longer Malcolm Little, the street hustler. He was Malcolm X, a man with a mission. He spoke with conviction, challenged the hypocrisy of American society, and gave a voice to those who had been silenced for far too long. But his journey was far from over. Everything changed when he traveled to Mecca. It was there, among millions of Muslims from every race and background, that he experienced something he had never known before: true brotherhood. In America, he had been conditioned to see white people as the oppressor, the enemy. But in Mecca, he prayed alongside men with blue eyes and white skin who treated him as their equal. He ate with them, worshiped with them, and saw no divisions. This experience shattered the worldview he had held for years. Islam, he realized, was not just a religion of Black empowerment, it was a religion of universal unity and justice. It was bigger than the struggle in America. It was a global force for change. This revelation transformed Malcolm once again. He no longer saw the fight as one of Black against white, but as a struggle of justice against injustice, truth against falsehood. He returned to America with a new message, one that embraced all races who stood for righteousness. This shift in perspective didn't weaken his fight, it made him stronger, more dangerous to those who feared change. He now carried a vision that could unite people across racial and national lines, a vision rooted in Islam's teachings of equality and brotherhood. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was not just a personal awakening, it was the foundation of his life's mission. It gave him clarity, courage, and the unwavering belief that change was not only possible but necessary. He had found the truth, and once he did, there was no turning back. Malcolm X's journey to Islam was more than just religious. It was a transformation of his mind, his purpose, and his mission. Before he embraced Islam, he was a man shaped by struggle, by a system that had denied him dignity and opportunity. He had lived a life of crime, not because he wanted to, but because that's what the world had shown him was possible. But when he found Islam, everything changed. It gave him a sense of discipline, self-respect, and a new way of understanding himself. He was no longer just a victim of his circumstances. He was a man with power, with purpose, with something greater than himself to believe in. Islam became the foundation on which he rebuilt his identity, and that identity became his greatest weapon against the oppression he had once accepted as inevitable. With Islam, Malcolm didn't just change his name, he changed his mission. He became a leader, a voice for the voiceless, a man unafraid to challenge the hypocrisy of a nation built on the suffering of his people. He spoke with conviction, with fire, because he knew firsthand what it meant to be at the bottom, to be told you are nothing. But Islam had taught him that he was something, that all men were created by God, equal with dignity. And that belief gave him the strength to stand against the forces that wanted to keep him and all Black people in chains. But Malcolm's transformation wasn't complete. His faith led him to question even the things he had once believed to be absolute. And when he traveled to Mecca, he saw something he had never imagined. People of all races, all backgrounds, praying together as one. It was a moment that changed him forever. He realized that Islam was bigger than just the fight in America. It was a faith that could unite people across the world, not based on race, but on justice and righteousness. This new understanding shaped the man he became in his final years. A man no longer fueled by anger, but by a vision of unity and truth. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was not just about religion. It was about finding the strength to become who he was meant to be. It gave him clarity, courage, and a purpose that would outlive him, inspiring generations to keep fighting for justice. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was not just a religious shift, it was a rebirth. Before Islam, he was a man shaped by pain, by loss, by a world that had given him nothing but struggle. He grew up watching his family torn apart, his father killed under suspicious circumstances, his mother institutionalized, and his siblings scattered. The system had failed him before he even had a chance. He turned to the streets, to survival by any means necessary, because that was the only life he knew. But prison became the turning point. It was there in a cold cell that he discovered something greater than himself. Faith. Islam entered his life like a force of nature, waking him up to a new reality. Through the teachings of the Nation of Islam, he found discipline, knowledge, and a sense of identity he had never known before. He realized that he wasn't just an individual struggling against the world. He was part of a people, a movement, a mission. Islam gave him a new name, Malcolm X, stripping away the identity forced upon him by slavery and replacing it with something powerful, something self-determined. He carried that name with pride, using it as a weapon against a world that had tried to erase him. With his newfound faith, he stood tall, unshaken, speaking the truth, no matter how uncomfortable it made those in power. But faith is not stagnant, and Malcolm's journey was far from over. He had been taught to see the world in black and white, but Islam pushed him to see beyond that. When he traveled to Mecca, he witnessed something that changed him forever. Men and women of all colors standing together, praying side by side, not divided by race, but united by faith. It was a revelation. He realized that Islam was not just a tool for Black liberation, it was a message of universal brotherhood, of justice that transcended race. This moment reshaped him, softened the edges of his anger, and gave him a new mission, one of unity, not just resistance. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was not the end of his journey, but the beginning of his true purpose. It gave him the strength to fight, the wisdom to evolve, and the courage to seek truth, no matter where it led him. His faith did not just change him, it defined his legacy. When he made his pilgrimage to Mecca, everything changed. For the first time in his life, he saw a world where race did not define a person's worth. He stood side by side with people of all backgrounds, Africans, Arabs, Asians, and even white men, all worshiping the same God, all treating each other as equals, who stood for righteousness. He still believed in fighting for his people, still stood against oppression. But now his vision had expanded. He no longer saw all white people as the enemy. He saw the real enemy as the system that divided and oppressed people no matter their color. And that shift made him more dangerous than ever to those in power. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was not just a spiritual awakening. It was the moment he became truly free. It gave him a new understanding of humanity, of justice, of brotherhood. And it gave him the strength to keep fighting even when he knew the cost. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was more than a personal transformation. It was a revolution of the mind, a shift in purpose, a rebirth of the man he was always meant to be. Before Islam, he was Malcolm Little, a man shaped by struggle, by a system that had denied him dignity and opportunity. He lived through the trauma of losing his father, the pain of watching his family fall apart, and the reality of growing up in a world that told him he was nothing. Like so many young black men of his time, he turned to the streets searching for power in the only way he knew, through survival, through hustling, through rebellion. But prison changed everything. It was there in isolation that he found a new path. Islam entered Malcolm's life like a force of nature, opening his eyes to a greater truth. It gave him discipline, self-respect, and most importantly, a purpose. No longer was he just another black man fighting to survive. He was part of something bigger. Through the teachings of the Nation of Islam, he found a voice, and that voice became one of the most powerful weapons against oppression. He spoke with fire, unafraid to challenge the hypocrisy of a country that preached freedom while keeping his people in chains. His faith gave him strength, a moral code, and a mission that would define his life. But Malcolm was never a man who stood still. His faith, like his understanding of the world, continued to evolve. When he made his pilgrimage to Mecca, he saw something he had never witnessed before: true brotherhood. He prayed alongside people of every race, men with blue eyes and white skin who embraced him as their brother. It was a revelation. Islam was not just a religion of black empowerment. It was a religion of justice, of unity, of equality before God. That moment reshaped everything he had believed. He returned to America with a new vision, one that extended beyond race, beyond anger, beyond division. Malcolm X's acceptance of Islam was not just about faith. It was about finding the truth, no matter where it led him. It gave him clarity, it gave him courage, and it gave him the strength to fight until his last breath. His legacy is not just in his words, but in the unshakable belief that the truth will always set us free.